Corrin leaned back in the worn leather chair of the Imperial Communications Hub, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Most days, Corrin's job was monotonous. Decode, analyze, file, repeat. But today, something prickled under his skin, a cold ripple of anticipation he couldn't name. The screens in front of him danced with data, streams of readings his mind sifted through with mechanical precision. And then, faintly, almost like a whisper, a signal appeared. At first, he thought it was interference. Ghost readings were common cosmic rays, solar flares, or, more often than not, a malfunctioning sensor. But the pattern was wrong, unfamiliar, elegant, yet impossible. He leaned forward, squinting at the holographic display. The FTL blip wasn't just fast, it was absurdly fast. Nothing in Imperial records had ever reached that velocity. Corrin called the junior operator beside him, voice tinged with curiosity and unease. Sensor 4 is reporting a well. It's moving too fast to track. Corrin didn't answer immediately. He was already running calculations in his mind. Fingers tapping across the console as he overrode autopilot filters, pushed diagnostics, opened deep archives. Data from Earth-era fleets, long vanished with humanity's disappearance over 2 centuries ago, streamed into the room. He cursed softly under his breath, mostly at himself. He was just an analyst. He wasn't meant to make history. He was meant to record it. And yet here he was, staring into a problem no one alive was prepared to confront. The signal pulsed again, and this time Corrin caught it fully, a broadcast, faint but unmistakable. Sequence of codes that hadn't been in circulation for over 220 years. Old Terran identification strings. Names of ships, officers, and ports that hadn't existed since humanity disappeared. His hand hovered over the comms console. Warning flared. Unauthorized transmission detected. Source unidentified. Corrin's heartbeat thundered in his ears. Every protocol screamed, ignore it, report it, do not engage. But instinct, an odd, stubborn human instinct that refused to be cataloged or controlled, pushed him to act. Corrin, the operator said again, now trembling slightly. Do you recognize that code? He swallowed. I think I do. For a moment, the room seemed to constrict, the hum of the grid louder, sharper. Outside the observation window, the stars seemed to blink, as if aware that something was approaching. Corrin's mind raced through centuries of history, ancient Earth archives stored in the Empire's forbidden vaults, myths whispered across galaxies, the disappearance of humanity. Not destroyed, not conquered, gone, evaporated into the stars without a trace. And yet the codes on his screen told a different story. He traced the signal's origin. The blip blinked, bright and defiant, cutting across Imperial sensor networks with elegance and speed no known vessel could achieve. And then the identifier appeared. USS Arquan. The name hit him like a gravity well. Arquan, one of the first interstellar flagship-class carriers built by humanity before they vanished. A ship that had been declared lost with all hands, buried in the memory of the galaxy as a ghost of ambition, and now was here. Corrin, what do we do? The operator whispered, voice almost swallowed by the low hum of alarms that now rang across the hub. Corrin didn't respond immediately. He felt a wave of disbelief, then awe, then fear, a cocktail of emotions he'd only read about in old human literature. He thought of the stories of human courage against impossible odd stories of survival and ingenuity, of desperate people confronting the abyss with nothing but faith, intellect, and stubborn will. And he realized in a heartbeat that thundered in his chest that these weren't just stories anymore. The Arquan wasn't just approaching it, was crossing every safety perimeter without slowing. Every Imperial ship within 3 parsecs froze in the grid's alert system. Their AI systems trying to calculate intercept vectors, to predict its trajectory, to prepare weapons that were meaningless against a velocity that defied logic. Corrin leaned closer to the console. He traced the ship's transponder signature. The hum of the Arquan's systems was faint, almost respectful, like an ancient creature treading lightly through a world that had changed too much while it slept. He caught the subtext, the hidden pulse beneath its FTL signature. We remember. His fingers trembled over the keyboard. He sent a hail through all Imperial channels, expecting silence, interference, a warning shot, and then A reply. Not a message, not a transmission, but a presence. It was subtle, more felt than heard, like the ripple of a tidal wave just before it hits the shore. The Arquan acknowledged them, but on its own terms. Corin, the operator said, voice breaking now. It's responding. I don't know how to explain it. It's alive, and in a way Corin understood. Humanity had vanished, yes. But humans, real humans, were never truly gone. They had always carried forward in whispers, in artifacts, in the improbable persistence of memory. And now, in this impossible moment, one of them returned. He felt a pang of emotion he couldn't name. Relief, wonder, fear, all three mingled together, leaving him dizzy. The Arquan's massive hull appeared on the grid, impossibly bright, almost ethereal. And though the ship moved silently through the void, its presence resonated like a heartbeat. Every Imperial officer in the hub was silent. Commands went unspoken. The usual tension of the observation posts, the petty rivalries, the bureaucratic squabbles, the endless reports vanished under the weight of this impossible visitation. The humans had returned, and their signature was a reminder that the past had never truly died. Corin's mind raced through questions he didn't dare voice. How? Why? And most impossibly, for whom? He tapped into the archives, scanning old Earth records for any mention of Arquan's last mission. Nothing concrete, only speculation, rumors, half-buried logs claiming the ship had entered uncharted space and never returned. But the codes, the identifiers, the very pulse of the Arquan's approach, it all matched perfectly. Corin, the operator, whispered, barely audible. It's broadcasting the old Terran codes. I can't translate some of it. There, messages, coordinates, names, A record of everything before we forgot. Corin's fingers froze above the console. A record, not a threat, not an invasion, a record. Humanity, in some forgotten brilliance, had preserved itself, not just the ship, not just the technology, but the memory of who they were, of what they had survived. He realized the truth. This wasn't a ghost returning for vengeance. This wasn't a machine sent to dominate. It was a reminder, a message from a civilization that refused to disappear entirely, that survived not merely in bodies or ships, but in the courage, will, and ingenuity of its people. Outside the void waited. The Arquan advanced, a pale silhouette against the stars, moving with intent, silent yet profoundly alive. Corin could feel it in his bones. Something was coming, something that would change the way the Empire understood not just humanity, but the nature of survival itself. He exhaled slowly, almost reluctantly. Prepare all decks for observation, he said, voice steadier than he felt. We watch history walk again, and somewhere in the silence of the cosmos, the hum of Arquan pulsed like a heartbeat, reminding him, the past is never gone, it waits. And as the first tendrils of its shadow crossed Imperial sensors, Corin felt a quiet, unspoken fear and an unshakable thrill. Because when ghosts return, the universe listens. Corin didn't sleep that night. He barely blinked as the Arquan edged closer through the Imperial grid, its presence a paradox of elegance and terror. Even the Empire's most advanced sensors designed to monitor superluminal threats struggled to keep pace. Every reading was simultaneously precise and impossible, like a language written in the gaps between reality. He watched as the ship's silhouette materialized across the array. The Arquan was massive, far larger than any Terran vessel the Empire had catalogued. Its hull glimmered like burnished silver under the distant light of Vera 9, etched with lines that traced the evolution of human engineering across centuries. Yet it wasn't the design that fascinated Corin, it was the aura. The Arquan radiated something more than energy, something human, determined, alive. Imperial commanders in orbit reacted predictably. Red alerts flared, weapons arrays powered up, and squadrons of interceptors scrambled. Every ship's AI tried to predict the Arquan's course, each calculation failing spectacularly. The fleet's movement was elegant, coordinated, yet clumsy compared to the silent choreography of the ghost ship. Corin, said Admiral Valen, her tone both sharp and incredulous over the coms. Report, what the hell is it doing? Corin's eyes didn't leave the holoscreen. He swallowed, trying to steady the awe and the fear churning in his chest. It's not attacking, he said finally. It's observing, broadcasting Terran data. It acknowledges us, but not as a threat. We're like a record keeper. Record keeper, Valen barked. Our sensors are saying it can disable our drives in seconds. We can't. The Arquan pulsed faintly, and every Imperial system felt it. Navigation, weapons, shields, they all stuttered and hummed as if the ship's presence bent the physical laws themselves. Interceptor drones shuddered mid-flight, and an eerie silence fell over the fleet. Corrin swallowed. It's ghosting through our systems. Nothing fires, nothing moves. It's passing through us. The Empire's officers exchanged frantic glances. Panic rose like an uncontained plasma storm. No ship, no matter how advanced, could behave this way. And yet here it was, defying logic. Every sensor confirming what their gut instincts screamed. The Arquan was beyond their comprehension. For Corrin, fear was tempered by fascination. Leaned closer, scrolling through ancient logs and Terran archives. Names flashed across his screen. Captains, engineers, even children born aboard Terran colonies, long lost to time. Coordinates map systems the Empire had never catalogued. Through all of it ran a single pattern. Survival. Humanity, he realized, had not vanished. They had encoded themselves into the ship, into history itself. A soft chime drew his attention. The Arquan had begun transmitting directly to his station, a series of visual pulses that formed an almost poetic pattern across the holoscreen. It was communication, but not in any language Corrin had learned. Still, the meaning was clear. Remember? Remember? He whispered. His own voice sounded alien in the tense quiet of the hub. He glanced at the operator beside him, who was staring at the screen with wide, terrified eyes. It's reminding us who we are. Or who we were. The Arquan's massive shadow grew across the fleet. Despite its size, it moved with impossible precision, slipping past patrols and sensors without triggering a single defensive measure. Every attempt to engage it failed. Beams phased through the hull like sunlight through mist. Missiles ignited and vanished mid-flight. The Imperial fleet could only watch. In the observation room, a sense of helplessness spread like wildfire. But amid the fear, Corrin noticed something else, a pattern of behavior he recognized from old human records. The Arquan didn't react with aggression. Its movements, though disorienting, were measured, deliberate, almost empathetic. He felt a chill as the truth dawned on him. The humans aboard this ship, long gone from the galaxy, had left a message for whoever survived. Not conquest, not warning, memory, legacy, faith. Admiral Valen's voice cut sharply across the room. Corrin, do you understand what this means? This isn't just a ship. It's a Terran ghost. They've returned. Corrin's fingers trembled over the console. He realized the Arquan's trajectory was no accident. Every movement, every pulse, every broadcast was designed to trace a path through Imperial space, not to conquer, not to destroy, but to leave a record. Humanity had vanished in form, but their essence, faith, ingenuity, courage, still endured. And now, in a galaxy that had forgotten them, they returned to remind others of what was possible. A soft alarm beeped. Corrin glanced at the sensors. The Arquan's main hull generator had begun a subtle frequency sweep across the fleet. Every system faltered, navigation, communication, shields all flickered, but nothing exploded. Corrin realized the ship was testing them, probing, reminding them of their own limitations. Humanity had disappeared, yet it still taught lessons. The room fell into tense silence. Officers whispered frantic hypotheses, theories ranging from advanced Terran technology to divine intervention. Corrin felt his own mind straining to make sense of it. But the Arquan wasn't making sense, and that was precisely the point. Then, something unexpected happened. The Arquan's sensors, somehow aligned with Imperial communications, locked directly onto Corrin's station. He felt a pull, subtle yet undeniable, as though the ship recognized the human in him, the one who understood, who saw beyond fear. For a long moment he was paralyzed. And then, without warning, a voice or the echo of one resonated in his mind. Not words exactly, but a sequence of emotions, images, and impressions. Courage, sacrifice, hope, faith. the pulse of centuries of human determination. Corrin staggered back in his chair, tears welling. He didn't understand everything, but he understood enough. The Archawan had returned not to punish, not to conquer, but to preserve. To remind, humanity had vanished physically, but their spirit, their ingenuity, their courage had endured now. They were reaching across time and space to teach it again. Outside, the Archawan drifted past the fleet. Sensors detected no weapons firing, no hostile movement, and yet every Imperial system that touched it stuttered, paused, and learned. The ship was alive in a way the Empire had never accounted for, an intelligence both human and transcendent. Corrin's mind raced. It's not just a ship, he whispered to no one in particular. It's a monument, a message, a warning, and a prayer. An operator nearby glanced at him, brow furrowed. A prayer? Corrin nodded, though the words felt inadequate. Yes, a human prayer. Not spoken, not written, lived, persisted, survived. Admiral Valen's voice cut back through the combs. Calm but edged with disbelief. Corrin, mark my words. The Empire has never faced anything like this. If this is what humanity has left behind, we've underestimated them. Everything. Every step we've taken in the galaxy, our arrogance, our triumphs, they pale in comparison to this. And there.
Teaching us?
Whether we want to learn or not. The Archawan pulsed again, brighter this time, like a heartbeat echoing across the void. Imperial sensors picked up fragments of Terran music, laughter, and code interwoven memories encoded in the vessel itself. Corrin felt a lump in his throat. It was human. Unquestionably human, beautiful, defiant. And then, without warning, the Archawan slipped through the fleet. Phasing across light years in a way no known physics could describe. Ships that had aimed at it with weapons could do nothing but watch. Imperial AI tried to predict its path. Every calculation failed. Every strategy collapsed. The Archawan passed like a comet across their grid, leaving only a wonder and fear in its wake. For Corrin, the realization was simple and terrifying. Humanity had not vanished. It had evolved beyond expectation. And now, the galaxy, the Empire, and every observer would see what true courage and ingenuity could accomplish. He turned back to the holoscreen and whispered, almost reverently, "The humans. They've come back, not to fight, but to remind us who they were, and who we can still be." Outside the window, the stars seemed to shimmer as the Archawan disappeared into the unknown, leaving only the echo of a civilization that refused to die. Corrin felt a surge of emotion. Fear, yes, but also hope. And a strange certainty that the galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere deep within him, he sensed a quiet order, a divine cadence in the chaos, a reminder that some things, like courage and human spirit, endure beyond time and comprehension. The Imperial grid fell into a stunned silence after the Archawan vanished. Sensors struggled to reconcile what had just occurred. Logs conflicted with themselves. FTL tracking arrays reported impossible positions. And AI algorithms collapsed under the weight of contradictions. The humans had returned, but not as conquerors. They had returned as witnesses, keepers, and reminders. Corrin sat slumped in his chair, fingers frozen over the console. His mind raced through 1,000 historical archives, searching for clues, patterns, anything that could explain the impossible. He knew this wasn't just a ship, was the embodiment of centuries of human will. And yet, the why remained elusive. Admiral Valen's voice crackled through the coms. "Corrin's status report. What did you learn?" He hesitated, aware that words would sound absurdly inadequate. "It's not attacking, Admiral. It's communicating in a way I can't fully interpret. It's Terran, alive, preserving knowledge, legacy, humanity." Valen's sigh was sharp, a mixture of fear and awe. Then it's a threat. By default, anything we can't control is a threat. Prepare a task force. Track it. Study it. Intercept if necessary. Corrin closed his eyes. Study it? Intercept it? After witnessing what the Archawan could do, even the notion of engagement felt ludicrous. Still, protocol demanded obedience. He keyed the command, sending instructions to Imperial fleets across multiple sectors. But inside, he felt a gnawing certainty. The humans were already teaching them something far greater than fear. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. A message flashed on his console, an anomaly in the data stream left by the Archawan. Coordinates scrambled and encoded in a way that resembled both music and mathematics. For a moment, Corrin's chest tightened. He recognized the signature. It was human. "Operator," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. "Trace that signal. Can you reconstruct it?" The operator, pale and trembling, nodded. I think so, sir. It's a path. Not a ship's path. A journey. Something to follow." Corrin felt a chill. The Archawan hadn't come to conquer or destroy. They'd come to guide. And in the quiet intensity of that realization, he understood. Humanity had left breadcrumbs, fragments of their existence hidden in the void, waiting for someone to find them. Hours passed. The Imperial fleet tried to regain composure, recalibrate sensors, and recover lost systems. But the Archawan's ghostly passage left more than disruption. It left understanding. In the silence, Corrin felt a stirring in his soul, a deep, resonant heartbeat that pulsed in tandem with the ship's memory. He thought of humanity's vanished worlds, the long-dead colonies, the cities abandoned after the Exodus. They hadn't disappeared entirely. They had evolved, hidden themselves in the mechanics of survival, coded their essence into vessels like the Archawan. The ship was not merely a carrier. It was a library, a monument, a reminder that the human spirit transcends mortality. "Corrin," the operator murmured, almost reverently, "there's a log, a personal log from the Archawan. It's addressed to anyone who survives." Corrin leaned forward, pulse quickening. Log flickered across the holoscreen. Names, dates, events records of bravery, of sacrifice, of ordinary humans facing impossible odds. Children's laughter, engineers' frustrations, commanders' quiet prayers, all encoded in sequences of light and sound, preserved for centuries. He read aloud softly, almost to himself. "We knew the universe would forget us, but memory endures. Preserve it. Whoever finds this, learn, survive, believe." Tears blurred his vision. He felt awe, humility, and fear, emotions interwoven like threads in the fabric of time. Humanity had vanished, yes, but its essence, its ingenuity, its courage had endured. And now it reached across centuries, calling for recognition, understanding, and faith. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, indifferent and eternal. Corrin could feel the Archawan moving somewhere beyond observation, beyond comprehension, its presence like a whisper across the void. And he realized something that shook him to his core. The ship's path wasn't T-random. It was deliberate. A map, a lesson, a test. He keyed a message to the fleet, though the words felt insignificant. "Track the coordinates. Do not attempt engagement. Observe. Learn. Humanity has returned, not to fight, but to remind us of what we have forgotten." Admiral Valen's response crackled seconds later, sharp and skeptical. "Are you suggesting this is some kind of museum? A warning?" Yes," Corrin said, voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. "A reminder, a monument. The humans. They survived, and they've returned to teach us whether we're ready or not." Hours bled into days. Corrin's station became a shrine of analysis, data, and obsession. He traced the Archawan's signals, reconstructing its journey across forgotten sectors, piecing together fragments of Terran history encoded in the ship's FTL pulses. Each revelation was a mix of wonder and terror. Humans had vanished, yes, but they had vanished strategically, cleverly, ingeniously, leaving lessons encoded in technology, music, mathematics, and emotion itself. And through it all, Corrin noticed subtle patterns, prayers embedded in engine pulses, sacrifices recorded in the timing of hull vibrations, faith encoded in sequences of light that repeated like a heartbeat. Humanity had survived, not by force alone, but by will, ingenuity, and a quiet devotion to something larger than themselves. Late into the third day, Corrin sat alone, eyes glued to the holoscreen, when a thought struck him. The Archawan's path converged toward a cluster of derelict Terran colonies, long thought destroyed. The ship wasn't just leaving a record, it was guiding him. It was drawing him toward discovery. He whispered under his breath, voice trembling. It wants us to see, to understand, to remember. A faint, almost imperceptible pulse resonated through the grid, a sensation more felt than heard. Corrin's chest tightened. The Archon was alive, conscious in ways the Empire could not comprehend. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a threat. It was human, in the purest sense. Determined, resilient, and impossibly clever. Corrin realized he was no longer merely an observer. He was a participant in something vast, something ancient and alive. Humanity had left a legacy, and now, through him, it might continue. He leaned back, staring at the grid and the impossibly distant stars, and felt the quiet presence of something immense, an unseen hand guiding events, subtle and divine. It wasn't in commands or decrees. It was in the survival of humans, in their ingenuity, in the Archon's impossible return. It was God, present not as preacher, but as architect, quietly bending chaos toward order, letting courage endure where logic failed. The Archon pulsed again, a sequence brighter, longer, a code that resonated with something buried deep in Corrin's memory, a name, long forgotten. It was a call. Not to arms, not to fear, but to witness. Corrin's heart raced. It's calling us. It's to follow. The operator glanced at him, fear and awe mingling in their eyes. Sir, do you think it's leading us somewhere? Corrin nodded, a mixture of dread and exhilaration tightening in his chest. Yes, somewhere that matters. Somewhere. Human. And as the Imperial fleet scrambled to recover from the Archon's passage, Corrin knew that nothing would ever be the same. Humanity had returned, not to conquer, not to avenge, but to remind the galaxy that courage, ingenuity, and faith endure beyond time, space, and oblivion. Outside, the stars whispered in silence. The Archon had vanished again, but its message lingered like a heartbeat in Corrin's soul. The past had never truly died. It waited, patient, knowing that one day someone would understand. And in that understanding, the first spark of a human renaissance of memory, courage, and hope was born again. Corrin felt the pulse before he saw it, a faint, rhythmic resonance vibrating through the grid. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakably human. The Archon was alive. Not in the mechanical sense, not in the way a ship hums with engines or thrums with power, but alive in memory, thought, and intent. It was calling him. The Imperial fleet had organized task forces, dispatched probes, and run calculations, but none dared follow the path Corrin had begun to trace. He understood why. The route led through derelict sectors, territories abandoned for centuries, littered with the ghosts of Terran colonies long thought lost. Ships sent by Imperial command never returned. Communications cut out in static whispers, logs ending in fragments of fear and silence. But Corrin did not hesitate. He was alone or almost alone in his decision. The Archon was more than a ship. It was a message, a challenge. A monument of ingenuity and perseverance crafted by a civilization that refused to die. And Corrin knew, deep in his bones, that he could not ignore it. He packed lightly, gathering personal survival gear, encryption tools, and a portable FTL module, his only chance of keeping pace with the impossible speed of Archon. The Emperor's mandate forbade solo expeditions, but Corrin moved in quiet defiance, driven by curiosity, duty, and something larger than fear. The first jump was disorienting. He felt the familiar twinge in his chest as the FTL engines ignited, space bending into the tunnel of impossible distance. Stars smeared into streaks of light, and for a moment he felt weightless in a way that was more spiritual than physical. When he emerged, the cluster of derelict Terran colonies sprawled beneath him, silent and decayed. Worlds once vibrant with humanity's ambition now lay in ruin, cities hollowed, streets cracked and overgrown, orbital stations dead and drifting. And yet, amid the silence, Corrin sensed presence. He could almost hear faint echoes, children laughing in corridors that no longer existed. Engines humming softly in long-abandoned bays. He docked at one of the stations, ancient and partially collapsed. The station's systems groaned, lights flickering on instinct alone, guided by protocols set centuries ago. Corrin's footsteps echoed through empty halls. Dust particles danced in beams of artificial light, revealing murals and carvings of human triumph, fear, and hope, artifacts of a people who had refused oblivion. He traced the Arquan's signal to the central data core of the station. Faint traces of encryption remained, almost fragile in their age. Yet Corrin's fingers navigated the sequences with an instinct honed over decades of analysis, and then he unlocked it. The data flooded the holoscreen, records of human colonies, projects, and missions long erased from Imperial memory. Names, dates, engineering schematics, personal logs, and even encoded human emotions appeared, small gestures of defiance and ingenuity, captured in lines of code. Humanity had vanished. Yes, but it had preserved itself in memory, encoded in ways that no empire could destroy. Corrin felt tears prick the corners of his eyes. He realized he wasn't simply reading history. He was conversing with it. He could almost hear the people of these worlds whispering through time. We endured. We hoped. We believed. You must too. A sudden vibration rattled the station. Corrin froze. Sensors flared. The Arquan's presence was near its FTL pulse, adjusting, scanning, observing. He realized with a mixture of awe and fear that the ship was testing him, gauging his understanding, measuring whether he was ready for the next stage. He walked deeper into the station's heart, following traces of human engineering that mimicked organic patterns, hallways branching like veins, lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Every step felt purposeful, so the station itself remembered the humans who built it and guided him to the Arquan. Finally, he arrived at the observation bay. The viewports revealed the Arquan floating majestically in the void, its hull reflecting the cold light of distant stars. It didn't approach aggressively, simply awaited a sentinel of memory. Its presence seemed to hum with the echoes of human will, ingenuity, and courage. Corrin felt a strange familiarity, a connection that went beyond logic. He realized that the Arquan had encoded human essence, its creativity, empathy, and defiance into every pulse. Every vibration, every flicker of its systems. Humanity had vanished physically, yes, but in spirit and memory, it endured. He sat before the viewport, watching the ship in silence. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time had lost meaning here. And then, the Arquan pulsed. And a sequence of visual data appeared on the holoscreen, a map, coordinates, and instructions encoded in a language that was simultaneously technical, musical, and emotional. The instructions were subtle but clear. Follow the path, learn the lessons, understand the spirit. It wasn't a test of technology or skill, it was a test of heart. Corrin realized that the Arquan was not merely a ship, was a teacher, and he was its student. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of centuries of human courage and ingenuity pressing against him. The derelict cities sprawled like frozen memories, streets cracked and overgrown, towers leaning in quiet decay. Yet amid the silence, he felt life something more profound than biology. The human spirit lingered here, etched into walls and coded in structures, preserved in the heartbeat of the ruins. He landed near a massive plaza, its cobblestones worn but patterned with designs that suggested order, logic, and care. It was unmistakably Terran. Despite the centuries, despite the vacuum of time and neglect, the elegance of human engineering remained. Stepping out of the shuttle, Corrin's boots crunched over dust and shattered glass. The air was heavy with the scent of metal and decay, but beneath it, faintly, he could sense the meticulous planning. The ingenuity of people who had built a civilization out of ambition and willpower alone. Every building, every street, every etched surface seemed to whisper, "We were here. We endured. We remembered." He activated his portable scanner, sweeping the area for energy signatures. The Arquan hovered just above the clouds, silent, massive, watching. The Imperial fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm. Sleek warships bristling with weaponry, sensors blazing. The banners of the Empire visible even across the vastness of the uncharted system. Corrin watched them approach from the observatory plateau, his pulse quickening. Their intent was clear. Capture, investigate, dominate. They would not understand the Arquan nor the human legacy it preserved. He turned to Elric. "They'll fire if they see us. They'll think we're trespassers." Elric's eyes were calm, unwavering. "Let them think. Understanding will come later. We do not attack. We demonstrate. We survive. We teach. Humanity has never relied on destruction alone. It relies on ingenuity, courage, and will. Corrin exhaled, feeling the weight of centuries of human endurance pressing on him. The Archon hovered silently above, its immense frame reflecting the cold light of the distant star, and then it pulsed. Not aggressively, not as a threat, but as a signal, a heartbeat, a quiet command to awaken the legacy of human resilience encoded within the observatory itself. The ground trembled subtly beneath Corrin's boots as the ancient Terran systems activated. Lights flickered, doors sealed automatically, and holographic projectors traced defensive and guidance patterns across the plaza. The Empire would not simply conquer what it did not understand. They would have to navigate intelligence far older, far subtler, and far more human than any algorithm or weapon they possessed. Sensors aboard the approaching Imperial ships picked up anomalies, energy readings, pulsing shields, and interference patterns beyond known physics. Their AI systems struggled to interpret the signals. Commands crossed in hesitation, and confusion spread across the fleet. The Archon had prepared a subtle defense, a test not of brute force, but of observation and intellect. Corrin felt his mind sharpen, the lessons of the Archon and the colony logs guiding him. Every system he activated, every pulse he sent through the observatory's control nodes, was both shield and message, a demonstration of human ingenuity. The Empire would not merely see power, they would see thought, creativity, courage, the hallmarks of a species that had survived where logic and technology alone would have failed. One of the Imperial captains sent a hailing signal. Identify yourselves. Stand down or be destroyed. Corrin activated the observatory's communication array. His voice, though calm, carried across the void, imbued with quiet authority. We are human. You may call us ghosts. We do not seek war. We seek remembrance. Static hissed, then silence. Sensors flared again. The Empire struggled to interpret the sudden activation of ancient systems. Fields of energy pulsed across the plateau, reshaping gravity flows, shielding corridors, and rerouting power to defensive arrays. The Empire had arrived, expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they faced a monument of intellect, courage, and subtle power. Corrin turned to Elric. They'll attack if we don't give them a reason not to. Elric's gaze swept across the observatory, steady and serene. They will learn, or they will fail. That is the lesson of survival. Courage without understanding is meaningless. They must see the truth. A fleet commander, frustrated, ordered ships to fire. Energy pulses streaked across the void toward the observatory, but the Archon intervened. Not with brute force, not with weapons, but with sheer ingenuity. Wise, its hull emitted a wave of interference, nullifying targeting systems, scrambling sensors, and redirecting the fleet's own energy back toward their instruments. Corrin watched, breath caught, as the Empire's weapons fizzled, misfired, and sputtered. The Archon was teaching again, not through fear, but through intellect and demonstration. Humanity's strength was not in destruction alone. It was in adaptation, creativity, and cleverness. And then the ground itself responded. The observatory systems activated in patterns centuries old. Holographic projections emerged across the plateau, recreating simulations of Terran engineers, strategists, and leaders. Each projection demonstrated human ingenuity, bridges built from minimal materials, survival systems functioning without maintenance, calculations predicting environmental collapse and recovery. The Empire witnessed not weapons, but brilliance. Corrin realized that the Archon and the observatory were not defending themselves. They were teaching. The lesson was subtle. Humanity's greatest weapon is thought, courage, and the ability to endure against impossible odds. The Empire, powerful though it was, could not comprehend or replicate the depth of understanding encoded in centuries of human experience. Elric's voice broke the tension, calm and commanding. Watch and learn, Corrin. Do not act out of fear. Act with courage and understanding. That is what humans endure with, and that is what humans survive through. Corrin nodded, internalizing the lesson. He activated one final array, channeling the Archon's pulse into a sequence that harmonized the observatory's defenses with the ship's subtle energy fields. The result was profound. The Imperial fleet's sensors became overloaded. Their targeting scrambled, their communications disrupted. They could not attack, could not interpret, and could not understand. Then Corrin spoke again, this time not as an analyst, but as a witness, a messenger, a participant in the legacy of humanity. You seek to conquer what you do not understand. We do not seek war. We survive because we endure, because we create, because we act with courage and ingenuity. You may attempt to destroy us, but you cannot destroy what is preserved in memory, spirit, and will. The fleet faltered. Some ships retreated. Others hesitated, unable to comprehend the human legacy unfolding before them. The Archon pulsed once more, massive and serene, a silent sentinel demonstrating not strength, but wisdom. Corrin felt a surge of clarity. Humanity had returned, not as conquerors, not for vengeance, but as teachers, witnesses, and preservers. Their power lay not in weapons, but in the endurance of spirit, in courage, in creativity, in the subtle force of faith guiding decisions across centuries. Elric stepped beside him, hand resting on the console. This is what we prepared for. The galaxy must understand that survival is not given, it is earned. Through courage, through ingenuity, through faith, however small and subtle. And that lesson, it's ours to preserve. Corrin exhaled, feeling the enormity of what had just occurred. The Empire had been tested, challenged not through fire or fleet, but through demonstration of what human ingenuity, courage, and spirit could achieve. The Archon hovered silently, patient, deliberate, and impossibly human. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, indifferent, yet beautiful. Corrin realized with awe that humanity had endured not through dominance, not through force, but through its ability to adapt, survive, and teach. The Archon Elric and the observatory were not merely relics, they were living legacies, proving that the human spirit is indestructible, even when the flesh has vanished. And in that quiet moment, as the Imperial fleet reeled in confusion and awe, Corrin felt the subtle presence of something greater, a guiding intelligence, a quiet divine hand shaping events, preserving courage and allowing ingenuity to prevail. Not a deity to command, but a force to witness, to inspire, to guide. Corrin pressed a final sequence on the console, harmonizing the Archon's pulse with the observatory. A low hum resonated across the plateau, a sound felt rather than heard, vibrating through the very essence of the world. It was a heartbeat, a human heartbeat echoing across centuries. And somewhere across the galaxy, those who would survive, who would listen, who would learn, began to feel it. Humanity had returned not to conquer, but to awaken courage, to teach resilience, and to remind the cosmos that spirit endures where logic and machines cannot. The Imperial fleet had withdrawn, confused, frustrated, and humbled. Sensors jammed, weapons neutralized, and communications disrupted. Their might had been rendered irrelevant, not by superior firepower, but by intellect, ingenuity, and a subtle, timeless strategy. Corrin stood on the observatory plateau, the windless air stirring faint particles of dust and crystal light. The Archon hovered above, silent, massive, a sentinel of memory, courage, and human ingenuity. Elric's gaze swept the plateau, serene yet intense. They will return eventually. Some will understand, some will never grasp what they witnessed. But the lesson remains. Humanity endures, not in conquest, not in empire, but in courage, creativity, and spirit. Corrin felt it deeply, a quiet fire kindling in his chest. The Archon pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. It had guided him here, taught him, tested him in. Now it seemed to ask one final question. Will you carry the legacy forward? He nodded, though the weight of responsibility pressed on him. I will, he whispered. I'll make sure they're not forgotten. That we're not forgotten. Elric's expression softened.
Good.
That is all we ask. The past does not demand revenge. It demands remembrance. And now you are its witness, its messenger, its guardian. The observatory hummed, systems activating in harmony with the Archon. Holographic projections shifted, displaying Terran ships, colonies, engineers, strategists, and ordinary people leaving, creating, struggling, and surviving. Corrin watched the scenes unfold, feeling the humanity in every gesture. Every decision, every act of courage and cleverness. The Archon pulsed once more, larger, more profound. Its energy wave extended across the plateau, reaching into the stars, brushing against distant systems, leaving subtle traces in the sensors and minds of those who observed. It was not an attack. It was a message, a heartbeat of memory and warning, a reminder that humanity had endured and could endure again. Corrin understood fully, finally, that the Archon's return was not about the past alone. It was about the living, the present, and the choices that define the future. Every human had been a spark, and now he carried those sparks across the galaxy, ensuring that the flame of ingenuity, courage, and spirit would ignite wherever it was needed. He stepped closer to Elric. Why did humanity vanish? Why leave the galaxy for centuries? Elric's gaze met his, distant yet focused. Because survival is not guaranteed. To endure, a species must adapt, preserve, and prepare. We vanished so that the galaxy could forget, so that the lessons would be preserved without interference, without corruption, and so that the right witnesses would emerge when the time was right. The Archon returned when it knew the galaxy and you were ready. Corrin absorbed the enormity of that truth. Humanity had not been defeated. It had chosen absence over compromise, endurance over stagnation, and now it had returned, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as teachers and witnesses. The observatory shifted again, projecting a star map of the galaxy, pinpointing the hidden Terran colonies, Archon's roots, and preserved knowledge centers. Every light was a story, every pulse a heartbeat, every projection a lesson. Corrin realized that the Empire, no matter how powerful, could never fully understand or control what he now possessed. The Archon had ensured that legacy was safe, encoded in ingenuity, spirit, and human will. He turned to the plateau's edge and gazed at the stars. Somewhere out there, humanity's ghosts waited not to haunt, not to punish, but to remind. The Archon pulsed one final time, a subtle, almost imperceptible rhythm. And Corrin understood, these ghosts had returned not for vengeance, not for glory, but for remembrance. And as he looked, a subtle warmth filled him, a presence beyond comprehension, a guiding intelligence, quiet yet vast. God, or whatever subtle order governed the universe, seemed to breathe through the Archon, the observatory, and the lessons of humanity. It was neither visible nor tangible, but Corrin felt it in every pulse, every vibration. Every act of courage preserved across centuries. Survival, he realized, was a collaboration of will, ingenuity, and faith. Even the faintest spark of belief could shape the cosmos in ways unseen. Corrin gathered the data cores, logs, and projections. Each step he took was deliberate, aware, as though the weight of centuries pressed against him and yet lifted him higher. He was no longer simply a communications officer, no longer just an observer. He was the living witness, the messenger of human spirit, trusted with ensuring that the courage, creativity, and endurance of a vanished civilization could inspire the living. He paused at the observatory's central chamber, gazing at Elric one last time. "Will you remain here?" Elric smiled faintly. "Some of us always remain. To guide, to wait, to preserve. My time here is not ended, but yours is begun. Remember, courage is action, ingenuity is survival. And faith, Evan, in the smallest form, is a force beyond understanding." Corrin nodded. "I will remember. I will act." The Archon pulsed, and for a moment, the stars seemed to brighten, as if acknowledging the enduring will of a species that had refused to vanish completely. Corrin felt the subtle presence of God again, the unseen intelligence that had allowed humanity's legacy to survive, guiding him, nudging him, giving meaning to endurance and courage. He stepped onto the shuttle, preparing to continue the Archon's course, carrying humanity's legacy across the galaxy. The stars stretched endlessly before him, both indifferent and full of promise. And in that infinite expanse, he realized the final truth. Humanity had returned not as rulers, not as ghosts of vengeance, but as beacons of courage, ingenuity, and memory. The Archon pulsed one final gentle wave, a signal of approval, a heartbeat of continuity. Corrin's fingers rested lightly on the controls. He was ready. The galaxy awaited the lessons of the past, and through him, the living would inherit them. He exhaled, steady, resolute. Humanity had endured. Humanity had returned. The courage of the living, guided by memory, ingenuity, and subtle faith, would rise to meet it. And as the shuttle lifted into the void, leaving the observatory and Elric behind, Corin whispered to the stars, "Not for vengeance, not for conquest, but for remembrance and for courage." The Archon hovered silently, a guardian and teacher. As Corin vanished into hyperspace, carrying the heartbeat of humanity across the galaxy, somewhere, far away, the Empire would remember not what they had conquered, but what they could never control. Humanity, though vanished for centuries, had returned in spirit, in courage, and in will. And in the quiet hum of the shuttle and the Archon above, one thought remained, luminous and undeniable. The past never truly dies, it waits. And sometimes it returns to remind us who we are.